morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Friday, the 18th of November. And today, if you don't know, it is White Ribbon Day. And on this White Ribbon Day, please take time out to consider supporting White Ribbon for all the things that they do out in the community. But right now, it's time to go to our news section and let's take a look at what's happening at the G20, where our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met many global counterparts.
At global summits, it's easy to want what others have, from the obvious plane envy to coveting bespoke stationery.
Prime Minister of the UK has a very good book.
Rishi Sunak is the third occupant of 10 Downing Street since Anthony Albanese became Prime Minister, keen to talk trade and the AUKUS Defence Pact. The British hopeful Australia will pick a UK-designed nuclear submarine as part of that deal, even though the US model seems more likely.
You'll have to wait until March and we'll make announcements when appropriate.
Speaking of submarines, the Prime Minister and the French President firm friends after their Parisian rapprochement in July.
Thank you, Mr Prime Minister.
Mr Albanese hoping the $90 billion French submarine dispute is behind them, although there's clearly still some resentment towards Mr Albanese's predecessor for tearing up the contract.
Re-entering into a nuclear confrontation, making himself completely dependent by acquiring a submarine fleet that Australia is incapable of producing and maintaining in-house.
For Anthony Albanese, the G20 has been a political and strategic success. He secured a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping while remaining steadfast on principle and consistent on Australia's differences with Beijing. Vital lines of communication are now open, but navigating the Australia-China relationship will very likely be a theme of Anthony Albanese's entire prime ministership. And he's not the only one, the Chinese president having a crack at Canada's leader.
Everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper, that's not appropriate. If there is sincerity on your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have.
Australia not the only one treading carefully. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Bali.
And of course, his Xi Jinping is quite strong in his own opinion and his own ways. The leadership qualities that he has is amazing. Well, right now we go to the news of MH17 and the verdict that's been delivered. Is it justice done? Is it too little, too late?
This is the longest trial in Dutch criminal history. It started nearly 1,000 days ago. And today it has delivered justice and delivered truth for the 298 people on board MH17 and for the 38 people who called our country home and for their families. I've been on that flight and so have many Australians. That these people could decide to down a civilian aircraft.
Sorry.
Hang on, just take a second. With children on it, it's beyond words. A bit tired, sorry. 2 Russian nationals and a Ukrainian separatist have been found guilty of the murder of all those on board, and a 3rd Russian defendant has been acquitted. We call on Russia to surrender those convicted so they may face the court sentence for their heinous crime.
Emotional panning out there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now to another disturbing news where youths are captured on camera ramming into police vehicle.
A brazen late-night attack on police that's left a community rattled. It was a close call for the 5 police officers standing just metres away, and for this local who captured the carnage on her phone.
Holy hell. Me.
A panicked rush took hold of Catherine's town centre as police tried to bring a stolen ute and troopy under control.
Thankfully, the police officers weren't in any of the vehicles at the time of the ramming, the deliberate and reckless act of ramming our police vehicles.
So far, a 14-year-old and two 16-year-olds are in custody. All three are known to police.
Those sorts of behaviours are unacceptable, and we need to be protecting our police in order for them to protect the community.
It wasn't just police who were targeted. A furniture business was smashed into, and the turf at the local golf course was also damaged.
We keep making excuses about this, but the reality is it's gone too far. What we're doing is not working.
It's not just Catherine feeling the impact of youth crime. Just last week, a crime spree made headlines further south in Alice Springs.
The Territory are crying out for action, and it's time for Labor government to do something about this crime right across the Northern Territory.
Police statistics show house break-ins and property damage in Catherine is at a 5-year high. Commercial break-ins are also the highest they've been in 2 years.
This is not the whole community. This is a small group that have escalated quite quickly, and I have every confidence that the police and Territory families, knowing those families, are absolutely on this matter.
Long-term residents say more needs to be done.
This behaviour is starting to build up anxiety in people that wasn't there 6 months ago.
An anxiety that's being felt right across the Northern Territory. Eleni Roussos, ABC News.
And a very, very disturbing footage there as well. Youth crime. Well, it is on the increase, as we know, and of course, some very petty but annoying things are also happening all around. Breakages into car storage areas. The parcel deliveries being, picked up. And deliberately, people wait for the parcel delivery guy. They know someone's not there. When they leave the stuff at the door, someone comes and pinches them away. Grocery stores, 7-Eleven kind of small convenience stores, they get their newspaper and milk delivered to the door before they open. They're closed. And it's always been the Australian tradition, they're always being left there. Now, we can see people coming and pinching those away. So all these kind of things which were never happening before, that is disturbing. Well, right now, let's go to Forbes and take a look at the flood situation, see how things are feathering there.
It's the water views that no one dreams of.
We lifted the washing machine probably 3 times yesterday.
The Whitworth's home has been swallowed. The lower story has become a victim of Forbes' second major flood in a fortnight.
We lifted them last time the flood went through and we thought they'd be okay, but this time there's no way.
The force so great, furniture was toppled.
My mother-in-law was living here. She's now homeless to a point. All that's left is probably a few of her clothing and a few bits and pieces, but that's all we've got left. All the furniture, as you can see, the bits we tried to save are now completely under, so nothing's safe down here.
The Lachlan River peaked at 10.68 metres, a height slightly lower than the 10.8 metre prediction. Forbes, still split in 3, is reliant on water transport.
This floodwater isn't going away anytime soon, and the major flood peak means it will be some time until people can safely get to their properties. The emergency response must carry on, and it's exhausting.
Sort of a non-stop, I think, for me personally. This is deployment 16 maybe in the last 18 months, and that's everywhere, all over the state.
Fatigued authorities now have international reinforcements. Singapore has deployed 18 flood rescue experts.
Our mandate is clear by our Commissioner to help, to render whatever assistance we can, and we'll be ready to go.
When it arrives, help will be welcome. Harriet Tatum, ABC News, Forbes.
Isn't that so good that, New Zealand and Singapore have come on board to help and assist? Well, right now, moving on, the next news that we have been covering is the closure of Deliveroo. So what does that mean for many workers?
The snap closure of Deliveroo has left contractors like this out of a job. They've been told they'll get a couple of weeks' pay as compensation.
Pretty upset and sad. I think they managed the things in the wrong way.
Deliveroo launched in Australia in 2015 and entered voluntary administration yesterday after its UK parent company pulled funding. The company's collapse has left 120 staff and 15,000 riders without work. and more than 12,000 partner restaurants in the lurch. This burger restaurant is one of them. Deliveroo made up around 30% of its business. Owner Nick Tuckwell is now scrambling to find a replacement delivery partner.
Massive effects. It was like turning off the tap last night. We had no delivery orders come through.
Deliveroo's demise leaves only 3 other major food delivery platforms. Experts say its closure is unlikely to be the last.
They're all competing for 2 things, competing for restaurants and competing for riders. And it's one of those sectors where it's a winner takes all.
For this kebab shop, it's good riddance to Deliveroo.
If I compare Deliveroo with the other application, Deliveroo was like pick up really slow and it's not organized in the orders.
While some businesses aren't upset about Deliveroo leaving Australia, fewer players in the market means less competition, and that's typically not good for consumers.
Each of them will be less inclined to be going for larger market share and more inclined to go for profitability. And how do you get profitability? You increase consumer prices.
Something that will...
And that is something which we commented on yesterday, that the consumers will have to start paying more. Already we have seen the delivery prices, even if you go onto some of these sites, that the delivery, they have the restaurant's prices, then they have the delivery price. The delivery price has already gone up, and it is likely to go up as well with Deliveroo out of the way now. Well, the other part is Sean Turnell has been released from Myanmar jail. He would be coming home.
21 months after he was detained in Yangon, Professor Sean Turnell can finally head home.
Honestly, it's the best news I've heard since the coup.
An advisor to the now deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi, Professor Turnell was arrested after last year's military coup, then tried and sentenced to 3 years jail for violating the Official State Secrets Act. He was supposed to be behind bars in the notorious insane prison until February 2024.
This all comes by surprise to the extent that Myanmar is very unpredictable.
Former British Ambassador Vicky Bowman and her husband, Burmese activist Tain Lin, as well as Japanese filmmaker Toku Kubota, are also on the list to be let out. The decision, Myanmar says, came after diplomacy and goodwill between countries.
When we have a Japanese national, a British national, Australian and American who the pressure can be brought to bear.
We obviously welcome the news that we have heard. This is good news. We've been very focused on advocating on behalf of Professor Turnell for a long time now.
They've raised Sean's case whenever they can diplomatically, and you've seen the results.
Professor Turnell will now be deported from Myanmar, but it's not yet clear how far along that process is. Australian politicians are nervous about announcing details of his release until he's safely out of the country. Burmese activists in the region are anxious too.
We want to see him arrive in Australia before we believe it. And we must not forget, Sean shouldn't have been detained even for a minute.
It's hoped he'll be on his way home in the hours ahead. Mazoe Ford, ABC News, Bangkok.
It's been mentioned that when he's here safely and finally, it would be that very big moment. Well, right now we're going to our neighbouring island country of Fiji, where the elections are being held. But, it started to be a battle between the 2 former coup leaders this time.
Let's talk about these two former coup leaders, and Frank Bainimarama, of course, has been there as Prime Minister for a while. Is he going to be able to secure a 3rd term?
Look, I mean, he is the ruling party. He heads the ruling party, and they have quite an unfair advantage. They've been in government for a long time. They're still in government now, even though the government's meant to be caretaker. So they have deep pockets. They have a lot of resources at their disposal, but it's going to be difficult. In the last elections 4 years ago, they struggled to get the absolute majority, and that struggle is worsened by the difficulties that people in Fiji have gone through. People want to change. change. And even Bainimarama has acknowledged that, because their party's slogan for the campaign is "We are the change." So it's definitely going to be an interesting election. It's probably the most contentious of the past 20 years.
That's so interesting. And his opponent, another former coup leader and a veteran of Fiji politics to a degree, Sitiveni Rambuka, he has managed to form quite a powerful alliance.
That's right.
How much of a threat is he?
I think he's a huge threat. The People's Alliance Party and the National Federation Party have managed to build a bridge of sorts across the Fijian society. Rambuka has a very distinct pool. He's got the indigenous people, he's got the urban elites, he's got the intellectuals. But Professor Biman Prasad is currently becoming quite a cult figure in Fijian politics. He's an intellectual, and so a lot of the young, a lot of the liberal, a lot of the socially just in Fijian society want him to lead. So between the two of them, they're going to put up quite a fight, and they've done so in a very structured way. People see them as an alternative government, and they've comfortably positioned themselves to be a government that people can consider. So it's going to be a tussle between these two. I would be very surprised if the ruling Fiji First Party comfortably leads. This should be an election that everyone can watch.
Very
quite excitingly.
exciting, yeah, and a real choice you feel for the first time. So you talked about, Fiji has gone through COVID and obviously the cost of living that everyone is experiencing. So what are the big issues that people are fed up with?
Beverly, those are the big issues. The entire world is reeling from the economic impact of COVID. So inflation, increasing cost of living, the war in Ukraine is not helping in terms of disruptions to trade. So those are the very similar issues that Fijians are looking to these elections to kind of address. But the cost of living in Fiji has been astronomical over the past 4 years or so. We have more than 30% of our population living under the poverty line, a lot more, close to that. So people are going to want to see a government that can offer some real policies, a creative way out of a difficult economical situation for us. But there's a real call also for accountability, for governance, for a more socially just administration. And this government has not quite enjoyed that as one of their characteristics. So these should be the kind of elections that are going to be very different because in the past it's always been bread and butter, but it's been 16 years of the same party. People want to change.
Yeah, and it's a different kind of form of society forming, particularly with young people.
That's right.
Who, have access to the world and what might be out there. Tell us about some of the candidates, because there are 55 seats and some interesting candidates have been thrown up.
Absolutely. So we've had an expansion. Our parliament is normally 52, or at least normal over the past 16 years, but that's been increased to 55. So there's a lot more candidates this time around. There are about 46, if I'm not mistaken, and we're seeing a lot of young people. The number of women who are contesting are the same as that of in 2018, but we're seeing a lot more young people, and we're seeing some diversity. I'm very happy to say today I did a call out on Fijian social media and found that there are trans women. There is one trans woman for the first time in our history. So it augurs well, I think, for optimism. People in Fiji want something to look forward to. They want a change and a government that they can relate to. And so we have a large, vibrant LGBTQI community that have not been represented in mainstream Fijian society. So these elections are showing some of that.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We can't move past the fact that these are two former coup leaders. Are they going to accept the results?
I think that is the million-dollar question in everyone's minds. Are Fijians, is the military, is everyone tired enough of the kind of disruptions that political upheavals have had? We have had the commander of the Fijian military forces say that the RFMF will accept whatever decisions people make when they cast their ballots. And I suppose that's something that all Fijians all over the world hope for. People have left the country in droves because we continue to do this. We continue to take over governments at the barrel of a gun. But I think given the pandemic, given the more frequent natural disasters that, of course, climate change has brought in, people are tired.
Yeah.
They want to move forward, and they want to do it using democracy.
The good thing with the Fijian election system is it's quick and clear-cut.
Very.
So it'll be very clear what's going to happen very soon and whether potentially there's going to be any dissent.
Yes, I think that...
So that will be something to keep an eye on, and let's see what happens. And as has been mentioned, that there are some strong contenders in there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and more on India and the Indian diaspora. Indian Prime Minister Modi met several top world leaders of the group of 20 countries and held bilateral meetings with his counterparts on November 16 on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. Modi also invited world leaders for the next G20 summit in India in September 2023. At the ceremony, India took over the presidency of the G20 from Indonesia for a year starting 1st December 2022.
The second and last day of the annual summit was a packed one for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He held bilateral meetings with his counterparts from Singapore, Australia, Germany, Italy, the UK and France on the sidelines. He met US President Joe Biden and Indonesian President Joko Widodo on November 15th. Importantly, the G20 Bali Declaration echoed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's remarks to Russian President Vladimir Putin, "Today's era must not be of war." Though it admits different assessments among members on the war, the declaration underlines that the use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. At the conclusion ceremony, Indonesian President Joko Widodo handed over to Prime Minister Modi the ceremonial gavel. The Indian Prime Minister then invited world leaders to visit India for the G20 summit to be held in September 2023 in India. Bilateral meeting started with Prime Minister Modi meeting with his Singapore counterpart Lee Hsien Loong, where they took note of the strong strategic partnership between India and Singapore and regular high-level ministerial and institutional interactions. Modi invited Singapore to invest in various sectors in India, including green economy, infrastructure and digitalization, and to take advantage of its national infrastructure pipeline, asset monetization plan and the Gati Shakti plan. At a working lunch with French President Emmanuel Macron, who is likely to visit India soon, the two leaders reviewed ongoing collaboration in diverse areas like defense, civil nuclear, trade and investment. Modi also met his German counterpart Chancellor Olaf Scholz, this being the third meeting between the two leaders this year. The leaders discussed a wide range of bilateral cooperation between India and Germany, which entered a new phase with the signing of the Partnership on Green and Sustainable Development by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor during the 6th India-Germany intergovernmental consultations. Later, PM Modi also held a bilateral meeting with the first woman Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, on the sidelines of the G20 summit. He congratulated Meloni and discussed with her the deepening of bilateral cooperation in various sectors, including trade and investment, counter-terrorism and people-to-people ties. Their talks also focused on looking forward to celebrating the 75 years of India-Italy diplomatic relations. He also met his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese, expressing satisfaction at the excellent state of relations between the two countries under the comprehensive strategic partnership and the high-level interactions taking place on a regular basis between India and Australia. He also held an important bilateral meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the first after Sunak assumed office in the last week of October. The two leaders expressed satisfaction at the state of the wide-ranging India-UK comprehensive strategic partnership and progress on the roadmap 2030 for future relations. They appreciated the importance of working together in bilateral and multilateral forums, including G20 and the Commonwealth. Prime Minister Modi told G20 leaders at the closing session that India's presidency will be inclusive, ambitious, decisive, and action-oriented, underlining environment, women-led development, peace and security, economic growth, technological innovation as priorities, which are embodied in the theme of India's G20 chairmanship, One Earth, One Family, One Future.
Modi has invited global investors to a new India that is skillfully using technology as a weapon in the war against poverty.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on November 16th addressed the Silver Jubilee edition of the Bangalore Technological Summit with a clarion call to global investors to join India in a technology-supported war to accelerate removal of poverty. In a pre-recorded message, the Indian Prime Minister said that India is using technology as a weapon against poverty. Modi said India's youth is equipped with technology knowledge and represents a skilled talent base to meet the needs of globalization. At the 25th edition of Asia's largest technology event, Modi said India is now well known for the red carpet for investors. The Indian Prime Minister said India had undertaken huge and bold steps in FDI reforms, liberalization of drone rules, semiconductor design and manufacturing, production incentive schemes in various sectors, and risen to make it easier to do business. Modi exhorted the investors to take a fresh and deep look at the new India in which, quote, your investment and our innovation can do wonders. Your trust and our tech talent can make things happen. I invite you all to work with us as we lead the world in solving its problems." End quote.
Ministers of India, Brazil, South Africa and China came together at the COP27 meeting in Egypt. The ministers emphasized the principle of common but different responsibilities and respective capabilities based on national circumstances.
Ministers of India, Brazil, South Africa and China representing the basic group met at COP27 in Egypt on November 16 and pledged their full support to the Egyptian COP27 presidency for a successful conference. The ministers highlighted that despite the enormous developmental challenges and pressures of poverty eradication, the basic countries continue to lead from the front on climate change actions. Speaking on the occasion, Indian Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav stressed that all countries are entitled to their fair share of the global carbon budget and must stay within this in their cumulative emission. He said physical access to the remaining carbon budget must be provided by developed countries, reaching net zero much earlier than their target dates. He added that access to a fair share of the full budget must be provided. The minister pointed out that this can be done through extensive negative emissions and monetizing the carbon debt of the developed countries.
India's Ministry of Civil Aviation has announced that face mask or cover are no longer mandatory during air travel in India.
The Indian Ministry of Civil Aviation has announced that now wearing face masks is not compulsory during air travel, but passengers should preferably use them amid the declining number of coronavirus cases. Till now, the use of masks or face covers on flights was mandatory. The ministry added that the decision has been taken in line with the government's policy of a graded approach to COVID-19 management response. It said the in-flight announcements will only mention that in view of the threat posed by COVID-19, all passengers should preferably use masks or face covers. It said any specific reference to fine and penal action need not to be announced.
India's Renew Power has signed a framework agreement with Egypt to set up a green hydrogen plant in the Suez Canal.
India's largest renewable energy company, Renew Power, has announced that it has signed a framework agreement with Egypt to set up a green hydrogen plant in the Suez Canal economic zone with an investment of $8 billion. Renew Power Private Limited is a subsidiary of Renew Energy Global PLC, one of the leading renewable energy companies globally. The company said in a statement that they had signed the framework agreement with the government of Egypt to set up a green hydrogen plant in the Suez Canal economic zone with an investment of $8 billion and a targeted annual production of 220,000 tons of green hydrogen. The framework agreement follows the Memorandum of Understanding signed in July 2022. This project is scheduled to be implemented in phases, the first of which is a pilot phase to produce 20,000 tons of green hydrogen along with derivatives annually. In the next phase, the production of 200,000 tons per year of green hydrogen along with derivatives will be achieved, thereby bringing the project's total green hydrogen production capacity to 220,000 tons per year. Renew Power will be further undertaking project and site studies in the coming months and is expected to make the final investment decision over the next 12 to 16 months. The pilot phase project is expected to be commissioned in 2026. Renew Power has partnered with Elsewedy Electric SAE, a leading integrated energy solutions provider in the Middle East and Africa, which will be the local co-developer for the project.
India's wholesale price inflation has eased to its lowest level since March 2021 following a drop in food, power and fuel prices.
India's wholesale price-based inflation for October 2022 has dropped to its lowest level since March 2021. The number dipped to below the double-digit mark and stands at 8.39% in October 2022, down from 10.70% in September 2022. According to the Commerce and Industry Ministry data released on 14 November 2022, WPI inflation stood at a 19-month low level due to a drop in the food articles segment, which slipped to 8.33% in October. Vegetable prices eased to 17.61% in the reported period against 39.66% in September. The fuel and power segment eased to 23.17% in October from 32.61% in the preceding month. The manufactured product segment also eased to 4.42% in October from 6.34% a month ago. Meanwhile, key domestic stock indices witnessed modest gains on November 15th, recovering from early losses. The BSE Sensex and the NSE Nifty both rose amid positive cues from global share markets. The Sensex closed near the 61,900 level, while the Nifty settled above 18,400 points. The Sensex climbed 249 points or 0.4% to close at 61,873. The Nifty also rose 74 points or 0.4% to end at 18,403. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap index added 0.08%, while the small-cap index ended flat.
Bollywood's mega film studio T-Series has released the title track of the upcoming film Mr. Mummy, starring Bollywood couple Ritesh and Janelia Deshmukh.
After the massive response received for its trailer and Papaji Pet Se track, T-Series has released the title track of Ritesh Deshmukh and Janelia Deshmukh's Mr. Mummy. The music of this track is given by Kumar and the lyrics are written by Sneha Khanwalkar. The song sung by Amit Gupta, Harjot Kaur and Sneha Khanwalkar is peppy and upbeat, which will definitely make you groove to it. Ritesh and Janelia's comic timing and unmatched energy add the perfect finishing touch to this out-of-the-box entertaining track. Listening to the song, it is guaranteed that the movie is going to be equally captivating and is definitely worth the wait. Presented by T-Series Mr. Mummy, a Hectic Cinema Private Limited production, and Bound Script Pictures Limited production stars Ritesh Deshmukh and Janelia Deshmukh. Directed by Shad Ali, the film is produced by T-Series, Sivanant and Shad Ali and is releasing nationwide on November 18, 2022.
That's all for this bulletin of the Daily India Report.
Thank you, Ankita, for that report. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now let's take a look at what's happening this weekend in Brisbane. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have time for you in today's segment. Don't forget that tomorrow we are back at 10 a.m. With the weekend edition. And tonight is the Queensland Multicultural Council's annual dinner. And today is the White Ribbon Day. And there's so many community organizations holding White Ribbon events and things. So, thank you very much for supporting. And the Queensland Premier will be holding her White Ribbon Breakfast on the 25th. So thank you, Premier, for that. And don't forget that tomorrow is the big show for Sahana Bhattacharya, and that will be such a wonderful sitar recital. I'd like to see you all there. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.